Okay, hello. I'm Varuna. As Ben said, I'm going to talk about creating fast flow in real-world systems that cannot match our ideal textbook definitions. I'm going to begin with a story. About a year ago, I started my role as principal engineer at this company called Prolific. And this role meant that I was sitting across 6 stream-aligned teams and 1 platform team. And while each of the delivery teams are focused on their area of the product or their part of the platform, our goal as an enabling function was to be that glue between the other teams and unlock flow across the whole engineering system. So one of the first problems that was brought to me as I started this role was this. We were getting complaints from customers that parts of our website were running really slow. So as any of you would do, I went to find the dashboards. I thought I'd look at some metrics and traces and see what was happening. And the dashboards looked something like this. They acknowledged that there were problems, and they pointed to where the biggest customer frustrations might be. So I was like, great, this is a good start. I can do something with this. So I took that dashboard, and I went to the stream-aligned team that owned one of the offending endpoints. I said to Tony was the engineering manager, I said to him, your team owns this endpoint. It's running slow. What do you need in order to improve its performance? And Tony said to me, yes, we own this endpoint, but the code base under it is a monolith. So in order to surface the data that we need at the top over here, the code touches all of these other domains and data sets. So it's hard to navigate, and it's pretty scary to change, particularly to change in the way that we want in order to improve the performance. So if you can align the roadmaps of these 3 other teams, then each of us can make part of the change to finally see that improvement in speed. And if any of you have worked in a monolith, you know it's often not even that easy to split the work up. So I couldn't justify this effort, and if I'm being perfectly honest, spending time aligning roadmaps just felt too far removed from solving the actual problem. So I felt pretty stuck. I was new to this business, new to the role, and in fact even new to the tech stack that the system is built on. And for the first task that was put in front of me, I didn't know where to start, and I really wasn't sure if I'd be able to make a difference, make an impact. So I was pretty nervous. Let me take you back a little bit. So I'm Varuna. I started my career at fairly established enterprises, but over the last few years, I've had the privilege to work at a couple of more scrappy startup scale-ups. Businesses that are fighting for this right to be successful. And I love this environment, right? I love the energy that comes from working in a team that's fully bought into a goal that seems kind of challenging, but also somehow achievable. I absolutely love it. It's super exciting. But that lack of bureaucracy and the need to deliver literally as fast as possible is a little bit of a double-edged sword. We, as teams, we have this incredible autonomy and this ability to make an impact, but the environment we're working in is kind of unstructured and chaotic. And part of being scrappy is creating those fast solutions that prove a concept, but those solutions aren't quite built to scale or aren't really resilient. So how do we marry these 2 worlds? The need to push hard and make sure that the business has a future, but also the need to ensure that when we get to that future, we haven't sort of shot ourselves in the foot on the way there. So as Steve was saying, in situations where flow is blocked, you look for the constraint, right? So what is the constraint? What are we solving for? So if we take the case of our underperforming endpoint from earlier, we've got a code base that was written by 2 or 3 close-knit engineers that is now supported by 6 or 7 cross-functional teams. So the ownership of each of these domains is distributed amongst those teams, but the underlying system itself is still one unified block. And of course, different teams are incentivized to varying extent to solve this problem. But the system itself doesn't allow for it to be solved in an efficient way. So if we were to plot the development value stream for making such a change, we'd see it would look something like this. So the team that owns that customer value would do some analysis, probably talk to the other teams to figure out what needs to change. And then we have this negotiation exercise to align roadmaps and sequence the work. Then all of the teams go off and do the work. Either they speed up the endpoint, or they hopefully in some cases decouple their domains from this stream of value. And then once all of that is done, and only once all of that is done, does the end customer actually see any improvement. So this is super inefficient, right? Just getting that cross-team alignment needs a fair bit of negotiation skills and a little bit of luck. And then we have the handoff. Suzanne was saying earlier how each handoff slows down flow, and it also grows our inventory of this unreleased work. So all of this together is just delaying when the customer would actually see value. In my experience, also very few pieces of work bring enough value to justify this amount of end-to-end effort. So what's the solution? We formed a working group. The origins of the concept of a working group itself seem to go way back, and from what I can tell, the framework has been applied by several different collectives. So from militaries to the United Nations to local government to schools and of course in industry. It's kind of like the movie Ocean's 8. Intentionally didn't choose Ocean's 11 there, but it's kind of like the movie Ocean's 8, where all these independent con artists and jewelers and hackers and thieves, they all get together to carry out this one big heist. But then once that job is done, they all just go their separate ways with their share of the loot in tow. That's kind of the pattern a working group follows. So in our context of technology organizations, a working group is a short-lived team of individuals who bring together distributed knowledge to solve a shared goal through undivided focus within an explicit time box. So let me break that down a little bit. So when I say short-lived, I mean that the team is together for a few weeks focused on this problem. When I say distributed knowledge, I mean that the membership of the working group is of people from across different domains, across different teams, and even different roles in the organization. Shared goal here means that the working group this goal must benefit from that multi-domain participation. So this can either be by bringing context. So each of the members of the working group are bringing context from their individual teams, and therefore making the decisions in the working group, making them better and more representative. But it can also be by creating buy-in. So when the working group has spun down, those individuals are taking the context and that journey to the decision with them back to the team. And then by undivided focus, I mean that the members of the working group are defended and completely removed and shielded from their day-to-day team responsibilities. So how does this fit in with team topologies then? If you're thinking this sort of sounds like an enabling team, I think that's right. I think this is an enabling team, but one that is short-lived and made up of members with deep context, deep hands-on context of the problem that's being solved, and also people who are directly impacted by the decisions and the solutions. It's not limited to people from the engineering org, of course. Anyone in the business who have a stake in that problem being solved can join in on the working group. But working groups also give me, as a principal engineer, this unique opportunity to be hands-on again and be in the code and really build that situational awareness that I need in order to make better cross-cutting decisions. So depending on the evolutionary context of your organization, working groups, I think, can be quite a powerful tool to deploy. So for instance, in the 2 startups that I've worked at, both of them scaled really quickly. And the goal of the scaling was to distribute the cognitive load amongst the teams, but also really it was to deliver more things. But what prevented that increase in speed of delivery was that the knowledge of those systems was still concentrated amongst those few original engineers. So working groups are this practical, hands-on way to share, to distribute the knowledge as the team grows. Then there are the generic problems, the problems that multiple teams face, but because of their isolated nature, they reinvent the wheel and solve them in different ways. So for instance, an example we have is how do we as a business automatically deal with right-to-be-forgotten requests. Each team solves that problem in a different way. So working groups help us involve the folks on the ground to define what the problem is, understand options, and then distribute whatever that chosen solution is for once across the board. And then there's a monolith, where we've got stream-aligned teams working on breaking apart a monolith, but that monolith itself still supports a lot of the revenue generation in the organization. So when there are platform issues in the monolith, or when we want to change something foundational in it, it's quite hard to assign that explicit ownership. So we hear things like, we know that's not the best way to do this, but that's how it's always been done in the monolith, so I'm just going to keep doing it, where it's quite hard to break the mold and change course. Working groups give this, empower individuals to articulate those intentions, those changes that they'd like to see, and then also create a little bit of a network effect around it. So using working groups then to solve our slow endpoint from earlier, we negotiated 4 engineers leaving their stream-aligned teams for a short amount of time. And within 2 weeks, the group had not only increased the speed at that endpoint, but they also improved the user experience associated with loading that part of the website. And I think this saved what really could have been a 3-4 month project. So off the back of that experience, then it got us thinking: how do we make this? Take this concept of working groups? How do we make it repeatable? How do we make it seem easier and better than an engineer going off and doing something side of desk, or even us relying on those heroes to solve the systemic problems? What does such a process look like for us? So every working group starts with an idea. And in my experience, the folks who are hands-on on the ground every day, they're just overflowing with these ideas. Not just ideas on how to improve the product, but also how to improve the system of work that we're in. So we start by making it really easy to pitch those ideas, here with a particular focus on those problems that need cross-domain, cross-team participation. So at Prolific, we have this lightweight template that focuses on goal, what's the problem that we're solving, how long is worth investing in solving that problem, and what people and what skills do we need to solve it. We actually found that once we'd made this way for people to express their ideas, they just came flooding in, almost as if people were just looking for an outlet to talk about this stuff. But once an idea is out there, we also have space for folks to express interest in taking part. So, for example, we had a working group proposal to explore and implement contract tests in event-driven systems. So this was quite novel to our business, so there are a lot of people interested in being part of figuring out how to do it. So there was a lot of immediate interest. This interest later informs who actually joins the working group. But once the gates are open, the pitches begin to flow in, and as you'd expect, we had more pitches than we actually had capacity to implement, or probably even desire to implement. So what we then do is, at a regular cadence, we take an hour to analyze these ideas. We get a group together and we ask ourselves: one, is this idea worth cross-team effort, or does it actually fit within a single team or with between two teams in a collaboration mode? And two, how soon do we want to put that effort in? These priority calls can be quite hard because you're sometimes trying to decide between two things that have vastly different impact. So for instance, a couple of months ago, we were trying to prioritize Americanizing the language across our website against improving the speed of our deployments. It's the same people doing the work. It's our engineering team that's doing the work. So we still need to pick one and keep our WIP low. Over here, the important thing is to make a decision. Making no decision is worse than picking the wrong thing. So we hear out opinions and then just choose. It's also important here that we are pretty ruthless with our prioritization. Working groups steal capacity from teams, and to a certain extent, they bypass the team's own prioritization process. So we need to have reasonable confidence in the value of the effort. Right, so once we have our priority, we just pick the top one off the list and form this enabling team around it. The members of the working group have a very short amount of time to go through the stages of group development. So we try to streamline and front load some of those forming activities. So we have this kickoff session where we get together and we decide on scope, measures of success, skill criteria. We also make some explicit agreements on how the group is going to collaborate and how we're going to communicate progress. We also plot the team members on this team onion from Emily Weber based on that capacity in that moment. We have an added role of an organizer right in the middle, someone to explicitly pick up all the glue work. Here's an example of a kickoff we did recently. The kickoff session is actually a really fun session as far as meetings go, because you start by talking about the problem, but you already know everyone in the group is interested in solving that problem. So very quickly, everyone gets excited and starts bouncing off of each other with ideas and just like talks of the impact we can have. Once the kickoff's done, the team's sort of ready to go. They can go off, ideate, experiment, slice the work, and create that systemic impact. And then at the end of the time box, the group wraps up. They take those individual learnings, go back to that team to create this organizational learning and grow the organizational brain. We've successfully deployed working groups to solve a bunch of problems. We've broken free of org-level service limits. We've reduced delivery lead times in a monolith. We've created standards for structuring and documenting events. We've addressed some platform-level reliability issues and a bunch more. But there's also this intangible benefit to bringing people together in this way. Where we have remote autonomous teams, working groups create this opportunity for one team's microculture to be exposed to another team. And therefore we create this environment where we're forming more of an organizational culture rather than a team-based culture. We give this opportunity for people to build empathy with other members in the organization who they otherwise don't get to interact with in this collaborative way. Working groups are also a great growth opportunity for individuals because you get to work with people with a different skill set and a different set of knowledge, but you also get the opportunity to step up and be that organizer and leader of the working group. It's also a great opportunity for leaders to do that Gemba walk, to get involved in the working group, get a little bit hands-on, and experience those on-the-ground frustrations that you otherwise don't see. So working groups aren't just about solving those individual problems. They implicitly result in organizational improvement. So I fully believe in this process, but it's not a silver bullet, of course. We've fallen foul to a few gotchas structuring in this way. So first, as a certain future president might say, the working group doesn't fall out of a coconut tree. So what I mean by that is that the need to step away from your team, from your core team, and block it out, that can be quite hard for individuals. It means you're purposely missing out on context and decisions, and then once the working group has wrapped up, you have to pick all of that back up and that can be quite hard. But that's the trade-off we're making. We are sacrificing those local team-level optimums for a more global benefit. Second, someone needs to own the end-to-end process. We found that extreme ownership, that kicks in once the working group has begun. But without explicit ownership of those pitch and prioritize sessions, the whole system sort of falls apart. We found that enabling teams are quite well-placed to own the process because we benefit from reduced individual team bias and also have slightly more of that cross-cutting context to make better priority calls. And then finally, I learned this lesson over and over in my career, but at some point, working groups will benefit from visibility and reaching outside a purely technical context. At Prolific, after 4 or 5 months of successfully running working groups, we saw the emergence of task forces, which was the same process, but originating from operations rather than technology. So making working groups, their purpose, the process, their outcomes more visible could have helped us as a business kept us from reinventing the wheel. Overall, working groups don't solve the underlying issues of lack of capacity or lack of distributed knowledge. They're this tactical tool that we've deployed to solve those specific flow-blocked problems. So I'll finish with this. When we structure our teams based on the teachings of team topologies, we create people who have deep context and feel a deep sense of responsibility for their product spaces. And that helps us build great products, right, in a sustainable way. So selectively leveraging and bringing together that context, that independent context and independent sense of ownership can really unblock flow throughout the whole system. So are there problems in your organization that you think could be solved with this tactical cross-team effort? I can see you nodding. I'd love to hear about it and talk about it after this. But that's it from me. Thank you for being here. Do we have time for questions? How are we doing?
We do. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. So you just mentioned the problem that you need to get people out of the team. I mean, I guess also the team has a voice in this. Do I understand this correctly? Or is it like agreed across the organization that if somebody wants to go to one of these working groups, he's just allowed to?
So it's a good question. So our principle is that, so we have Slack in the team. So every team in their road mapping assumes that one person will be out at all times. And that's an overestimation. It's usually not that much. So usually you have your full team. So once we've built that Slack in the system, when that particular topic is at the top of the queue, we go to the people who have expressed interest and say, talk to your teams. These are the dates we're going to start, and this is the time box. Ask your teams if you can join. And then some teams say, no, actually, we're really trying to hit this deadline. We can't spare the capacity. And some other teams say, yes, of course, you can go join. And the people who are really interested but can't leave their teams in that moment, they in that team onion, they form the supporters. So they join in on the Slack channel, and they can be actively involved and give feedback on the happenings of the group, but they're not a core member of the group actually doing the work.
Yeah. Hi. Once the working group has completed whatever they were going to deliver, how do you find decision-making around who is going to own that afterwards? How is it going to be supported?
So it's a really good question, right? So what if the working group creates software that then doesn't have ownership? So we haven't had that so far. So working group. So most of our working groups have had to deal with foundational issues in our monolith. So that as a platform for us is currently unowned, right? Everybody owns their area of it, just how you would assign ownership to a unified monolith. So that's why we have a higher need for working groups, because we have a big system that doesn't have a cross-cutting owner. So the other situations where we've made more systemic changes, so thinking the AWS service limits, the output of that group was a set of guidelines that we then distributed out to teams to say, to keep us from hitting those service limits once again, this is what we need to do. We need to automate tearing down our ephemeral stacks, this kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi. How do you ensure that if whatever you deliver by the end of it, if it's a product or a service, that when another team needs to take it back on to own it, or someone else in the org, and they weren't necessarily involved, how do you train them? Because the knowledge is within the working group, and that's the first problem of the monolith, right? In a sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So really good question. Quite similar, right? So if the working group is working on a thing that another, like a stream-aligned team owns, we ensure that there's representation from that team. So one of the core, like the underpinning principles here is that we don't change things that, or the people involved in changing the thing are going to be the people who are owning it. So if you're touching, so in the example of our slow endpoint, the team that owned that customer value sent more people, sent a couple of engineers, and then we had a couple of engineers from the other teams. So you still make decisions that impact you. If there is a clear owner to that of that value, then that work goes into the team and isn't a working group. Any more? Oh, back there.
I'm coming. Hi, Varuna. Great talk. My question is, how do you avoid the working group pitches turning into, in effect, like a technical roadmap that becomes divorced from sort of delivering customer value and it becomes completely separate from the product roadmap?
I didn't quite hear you. So are you asking, I'm just going to play back to make sure I understand, how does this not create a separate stream of work separate to the product roadmap? It is a separate stream of work that isn't on the product roadmap. I think there's no getting around it. So we create a buffer in the product roadmap to tackle these problems that are the opposite of value impact multiplying across teams, because we can't split all the work exactly into the team types from team topologies. Cool.
Any more? Time for one last one?
Oh, here we go.
How do you handle, or does it come up that the time estimated wasn't long enough, it's more complicated than you thought, working group doesn't deliver anything useful?
Yeah, of course. So I think that's the benefit of the time box, that you're kind of saying, this is how much effort we're willing to put in to solve that problem. And if it's not solved in that much effort, and it's hard to do sometimes, we just say, okay, now we have to go back to our original teams. So I'm trying to think of an example. I think in one case we extended the working group by a week, but I'm trying to think. Actually, I can't think of an example where we've just gone, we didn't make any impact. One of the parts of the retrospective at the end of a working group is to talk about what was de-scoped. It's not super clear here over there. So if we couldn't, we obviously can't, when we start the working group, we don't know exactly what the solution is, right? We're coming in with a high-level problem. So we try to do some things to get there, and then at the end of it, we document, these are the things we think we also should do. We de-scope it, and some of them become proposals for future working groups.
Anyone have a micro question? No micro question. Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Varuna.
Cool, thank you.